When I first went to scout camp, I remember crying my eyes out as a 5-year-old until my dad came to get me. He arrived disappointed and said one day I would miss these experiences. On this occasion, he was right. After that year, I went back every year, 3 or 4 times a year in fact, and enjoyed every single time I went. Being so tired on guard duty as a 7-year-old and putting my head on a rock and falling asleep immediately. Waking up in July in the UK and finding the entire camp blanketed in snow. Travelling to France and Armenia and experiencing different cultures, singing songs, dancing, competing, arguing, and tearful embraces when we parted. I remember all of these memories with fondness, and I wish everyone would allow themselves the opportunity to create similar memories. Thank you, Tania, for your time. 2 on the mic, clocking out. Enjoy.
Dong weche pek kod welo mabiro e 2 under mic. Dong parodit kod jok mawuoye 2 under mic. Seche tin sud buta wawinji e 2 under mic. Wala wachokre wabed piny bi wawinje ero chako moment ndi and a podcast makende.
I'm joined by Tania from actually a different organization to what we're going to be speaking about today. But I'll just say Tania from Germany for now. Tania, how are you?
I'm fine, Zach. Lovely to be on your podcast. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it's great to have you. It's my little mini introduction there seemed a bit odd because really we had intended to talk about a fantastic charitable organization called Save the Children. But then when we met, you told me that you are heavily involved in the scouting movement. And then that was it. So, which brought back great memories for me. But yeah, so would you like to talk a little bit about, or just tell us a bit about how you got involved in scouting?
Yes, so maybe I can just introduce myself. I'm Tania Roach.
Of course, yeah.
I'm actually a British national originally, but now living in Germany for the last 20 odd years. For the last 8-9 years, I've been working professionally, as you've just mentioned, for NGOs. So firstly for WWF and now for Save the Children since January. But what has always accompanied me since I was very, very young is my involvement in the Scout movement. Initially as just being originally a brownie guide, actually, and girl guide in the UK up until the age of 16. And then when I was 16, I joined the Venture Scouts in the UK. And since then, I've been involved in various capacities as a young leader, but then at national level in the UK and then at international level. And still now today involved in advisory capacities in a couple of different working groups at world level. So that's a bit to my background, and yeah, we're here to talk about scouting.
I told you at the time as well that I spent, I think it must have been about 20 years in the Armenian Scouts. So a slightly different organization, but still connected internationally to the international Scout movement. The way that the community was set up then in the Armenian community was that you kind of got involved in Scouts and you went through it, and then you became a leader at the age of 16, 17, and then you kind of worked on a bit more. And if you wanted to get involved in the sort of management of the whole organization, you did so, or you moved out and did different kind of youth work, educational programs and workshops and so on. But there are only so many management positions for the scouting organization, so not everybody did that, but you've managed to stay connected in various capacities throughout your life. Wow. I mean, what is it that keeps you there? As in, I know we could talk about individual little so highlights and so on, but what is it for you that just you have to stay connected?
I think there's a very famous saying. It says, once a scout, always a scout. I think the scout values live on through you, through your entire life. But I think there's also a very social aspect. A lot of my very, very good friends, intense friendships over the years have been through scouting. And through being involved in different projects and through different working groups and different committees, you obviously re-meet people, you find people again, and that's what keeps it alive, really. It is the actual social aspect. But the combined with the fact that you have a sense of purpose, and I think the experiences I had as a young person, which maybe we can get into, you just wish that for other people. You want to almost hand on the baton and want to see other young people develop and benefit from scouting in the same way that I believe I have. So that's what keeps me re-involved, re-interested. And now I have to say I'm a bit older now, so I'm more involved in the marketing side and also some of the fundraising aspects of scouting in order to ensure that we can get as many young people involved as possible for the future.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we'll be good to talk about some of your earlier experiences. And I also wanted to do a bit of sort of cultural, not necessarily comparisons, but talk about some of the differences that may have existed between the Armenian scouting movement and also the international or British scouting movement. But let's kind of attack, as it were, a modernish topic with regards to scouting. Some people consider becoming a member of a scouting organization to be uncool, if I can use an 80s word. But for me, and I'm sure for you as well, but for me, scouting has always been cool. And I can't ever possibly imagine my youth without having had that experience. So how can we communicate to people who have reached their teens and have never experienced that? How can we get them into it? How can we explain to them, actually, do you know what? It is really cool.
Yeah, so scouting is sometimes difficult to explain for people from the outside. I think what people from the outside sometimes see is maybe some young kids in a uniform with a funny neckerchief and salutes. And there's certainly in the UK the tradition of scouts helping people across the road. So a very old-fashioned image, but I would say certainly in my village when I was a venture scout, scouting was virtually the only youth activity that was available, so that made it very attractive. It was always about being outside, it was about adventure, it was about campfires, it was about walking, orienteering, camping, all those things, but particularly doing activities in a group together, learning together, solving problems together, essentially having a lot of fun. I would say the word fun is probably big capital letters for me. You laugh a lot of social things, you're planning different activities together, doing crazy stuff, having very intense experiences. And when you're young in your teens, obviously getting to know people is a big part of it, relationships, doing things as a group, but doing things with a purpose because you're always planning and organizing yourselves. So I think that's a big part of scouting. There are two principles, I think two big things, learning by doing. So it's really about doing something and not just talking about doing it, but really doing it, learning from your mistakes, but also doing things in a small group. So there is this patrol system where people come together and different people organize different things at different times and take on different roles. So I think you're learning what I would say is life skills for later, learning how to organize, how to structure yourself, how to get people motivated, how to get people involved. So all essential things for the work environment for later.
Yeah, very much. And one of the things that you also say there, which resonates very strongly with my memories, is the fact that as a young person, you're quite quickly given a certain amount of responsibility. As you said there, you have to organize yourselves and you have to plan things and you have to prepare things. Whereas normally kids, I remember as being a younger person, in other circumstances, I was never given such responsibility as was given to me in Scouts. And that's really empowering, is it not?
Absolutely. I think that is something very special about scouting, that you learn to take on responsibility from a very early age. I mean, the patrol system, you have a patrol leader. So there's somebody that is coordinating that small group. Particularly in Germany, you have a lot of very young leaders actually at a scout group level even. So the groups are run by people that are maybe in their 20s or early 20s. And then you're responsible for younger children underneath you. So you're having to plan activities, to think about how you communicate with people, how you motivate other people, and then there's a big sense of achievement, because it's about achieving things together and seeing other young people develop themselves in different ways. So there's a lot of satisfaction, I think, as well, that comes with scouting, with a lot of responsibility early on. But people don't really realise it, I think, because you're having fun as you're doing it. It's not. I think the key thing about scouting that's different to school, it's non-formal education. So you're learning, but because it's optional. So you're not being forced to do anything. Things are optional, but then people are actually doing and learning stuff that they probably would not be learning at school in the same way.
Yeah, and I've often heard people critical of school education saying that why do you learn how to, I don't know, draw this kind of a triangle or measure that angle when you grow up or when you leave school? You don't need to draw triangles. What you need to do is learn how to do other practical things. Whereas in Scouts, when I was there, that's more or less all we focused on, was the practical things, the things you really needed to know. And in addition to that, some survival skills, which may also become very important depending on what happens with the climate.
Yeah, no, I think there are lots of practical skills. I think I would say I did learn, map reading, how to use a compass. Maybe that today with the mobile phones is not so critical anymore. But I love looking at maps. I love being able to find my way, also in a car. Solving problems. We used to do a lot of, now get out of that type of situations. So you're giving a task and have to solve something or build something, building a raft to cross a river. Building different types of, I suppose, camp furniture, if you want to call it, building a table and chairs just out of logs and using square lashings, all those sorts of things. So yes, a little bit survival, but practical things that you can apply maybe later on in life. But I think that probably the key thing I learned is more the soft skills that I think in terms of influencing my later life, how to organise, how to work as a team, how to divide the tasks, getting that pleasure from achieving results together. Also learning to test yourself a little bit, doing things you wouldn't normally do, testing yourself, going on camps and hikes that take you to the level of exhaustion that you would not normally do in your normal life, and finding out how you function when you're really tired or when you haven't slept well during the night or when you're really wet and the weather's not great. All these things that you can laugh about afterwards, but actually at the time are pretty hard, but you learn how to manage in difficult circumstances.
Yeah, which is really good preparation, as you say, for adulthood. And another thing, again, to emphasize some of the points that you make, these soft skills, these organizational skills, I've often noticed in other situations at work and so on, when we've been given a task or a responsibility as a committee, and then people sit down and say, okay, well, what do we do now? I feel that because I've lived these things from the age of, I don't know, my early teens on. So straight away, if I'm given a task or a project, I know more or less how to start planning it, because that's what we were taught. And it comes really naturally. So straight away, there's a certain element of leadership there when you see there's a need for that leadership. But at the same time, what Scouting also taught us was to respect other people, to give other people their space in which they can present their ideas and concepts too. And these are all measures which are becoming much more important in our professional workspaces too.
Yes, no, I completely agree. There are lots of things that you can take into your normal life, into your work life later. But I think one of the key aspects is that within Scouting, it's about becoming an active citizen, taking a role and responsibility in society, trying to give service as well. There are a lot of Scout projects that are about service, community projects. I remember clearing out ponds for in our village pond, or helping with various other initiatives in the village. And the Scouts would always be called on to help at the summer festival or at the summer fete from the local community, that doing the car parking, all sorts of different tasks that you get asked to do to give that service to community. But again, you're doing it as a group and you're organising yourselves the whole time. So yeah, I think there is a big aspect about helping people or teaching people to become active citizens. Looking after the environment is another big aspect. Nature, being outdoors, learning to appreciate nature, and therefore thinking about how to be more sustainable in our lives. So lots of, I think, topics that come through Scouting just naturally that then are important topics for the community at large.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was going to be another topic or direction that we were going to go into, and it's cool that you've brought us there already. So when I see movements like Fridays for Future, when I see younger people being engaged, younger people wanting the vote, and when they're given the opportunity to vote, going out and voting, being politically, but also socially, more importantly, active. These are things which I see that Scouting can really help younger people to know basically how to do these things, how to get involved. But the environmental side is, I just associate Scouting with exactly that, being out in nature, being a part of nature, being connected and surrounded by nature, having respect for what it can provide you, but also knowing what we should not do. And of the dangers of certain kinds of activities, like lighting fires in certain areas at certain periods of a time, not killing wildlife or not consuming certain kinds of berries and so on. These are kinds of things which you don't normally pick up in a classroom. And it's something which Scouting just naturally communicates and allows people to enjoy with others at the same time. I mean, how can that be cooler? I mean, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, something coming back to your comment at the beginning, why do people say it's uncool? But I think once you're involved in Scouting, I think people will say the experiences you have are stories that you can talk about for the rest of your lives. And it becomes very, very cool, some of the adventures that you have, and the principles of just being around a campfire at night, the atmosphere, singing songs together, but then clearing up and making sure that your traces cannot be found. So leaving the place as you found it. So that's another key principle. Learning how to cover up your tracks, getting rid of your rubbish, all those basic things that to make sure that the environment is not harmed by you having been there. So yes, we'd never say it's uncool. I would say it's very cool, and there are lots of benefits to being involved in Scouting, as well as not just the local Scouting. I mean, we can start talking about the international aspects of Scouting, because once you are part of the movement, you will meet people or have the opportunity to meet people throughout the world that are also Scouts. And there is, Scout is a friend to all Scouts, so there is an openness. You have that common understanding of some of the Scout values that you will find that people exchange very readily or receive visitors very readily once they have that common Scout connection. So it does bring people together. And another part of the movement is about promoting peace. We talk about messengers for peace, and having more understanding for different cultures, different backgrounds, different religions. So wherever people come from, Scouts are the same all over the world, share similar value bases, and therefore you can actually hopefully have a bit more of a friendly, peaceful understanding of each other, and actually get talking to each other.
I mean, I don't want to politicize our conversation, because I do recall one of the things that we, as a Scout, that we kind of tried to sort of stay away from was to politicize too many of the debates and the workshops that we had. But these are fundamental principles which came up through the Scouting movement and have been with the Scouting movement perhaps since the beginning. This sense of mutual respect, this sense of tolerance, this sense of understanding, this openness to new experiences, different kinds of people, different opinions, different thoughts. When we look at what's going on, both unfortunately in the UK and also as we saw on Sunday with the European elections, there appears to be a need perhaps for younger people to engage in this kind of thinking earlier on, so that they can avoid the pitfalls of hate-filled politics later on in life. Now, obviously, both of us are already convinced about the huge benefits of Scouting. But surely there's also a message there that we can pass on to others who haven't been involved. There are different ways of interacting.
Where we have scouting, there's an option to get involved and to learn about all of these different activities and all of these different skill sets. I think one of the challenges that scouting has is it's not equally available to everybody in every country in the world. So there are countries where it's very strong and countries where it's not so strong. I mean, particularly in Germany, where we're both based at the moment, there are 5 different associations within scouting. It is much more prevalent in the West Germany than the East because of the history. So there's a big initiative to try to get more and more scout groups opened up and started in East Germany. But still the availability isn't there in every village and every place. So that's perhaps something that scouting is looking at, and one of the reasons why we're trying to fundraise to help scouts to set up. And you obviously need the volunteers at the centre of it all who want to actually start scout groups and start to get it going. So there's quite a lot of work at the start. But once a scout group has established, it tends to have a traditions and history, and then you bring in the brothers and the sisters and you bring in the friends, and then it starts to become a little bit like a snowball effect. So scout groups will grow, but getting them started and getting them off the ground is sometimes difficult if you don't have the right people that want to start it. But that is a big key, particularly in Germany. We've just seen the results of the elections, with the far right becoming more prevalent, particularly in Eastern Germany. There is very little scouting in Eastern Germany, so that actually puts that maybe a bit more on the map in terms of a priority for the future, maybe to try to counteract and to bring different values of respect for each other into the frame.
Yeah, very much so. And what is also, I think, what had an impact on me, and I'd like to, maybe this is one of the areas where I'm a lot more ignorant with regards to the British scouting movement, because with the Armenian scouts that I was a member of, from the beginning, girls and boys were mixed in every group. And so we had to interact. We were forced. We couldn't just go away and play football. We had to engage in other kinds of games which allowed us boys and girls to play together. So from an early age, I have 2 brothers. I don't have any sisters, unfortunately. But through Scouts, I was able to experience different thoughts, different opinions, different ways of doing things that I would perhaps not have normally been able to do. And I always thought that British Scouts did not mix boys and girls, but in talking, you kind of told me that that's not really the case anymore,
that used to be the case. I think what you're referring to, I mean, when I was younger, I could only become a scout at the age of 16 because they had mixed venture scout units. And before that, it was separate girls and boys. So the girls would go be part of the World Guide movement, or World Association of Girl Scouts and Girl Guides, which is a separate movement to the World Organization of the Scout Movement. But that has, I think, I can't remember the exact date, but scouting has become fully mixed at all levels from the age of 6 or whenever it's that they start nowadays. So scouting is really open to boys and girls at all levels in the UK. Each country is slightly different. I mean, in Germany, I think they've been mixed throughout, but they do go through a phase at the teenage years where your patrols are not necessarily always mixed. You might have one scout group and then you might have girl patrols and boy patrols. So where it's appropriate at certain stages in young people's lives, it might be more appropriate to have single-sex groups and other situations where you have mixed groups. So I think there's a very a wide array of different possibilities within scouting, and essentially scouting is now open to all sexes and to all people. But at a local level, may be organised slightly differently depending on the needs of the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so then, because you said that you joined Adventure Scouts as well, so then you switched from an all-girl organisation to a mixed organisation.
Yeah.
And I mean, how obviously you'd seen boys before this. I
was at a mixed school, so it wasn't like it was a complete shock though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
no, I mean, I think for me, it was obviously at 16, it's far more attractive to be in a mixed environment. So I think there was no debate for me about, continuing to stay in an all female environment, or much preferred to be in a mixed environment. Yeah.
Was there any significant difference, though, for you joining a mixed group from what there was before? And if you look at it nowadays, do you think it's better that it's mixed from the beginning?
Oh, you're asking me to go back a long time ago. Was there any real difference? I guess within the guide environment, it's all about much more about female empowerment and making young girls more confident about themselves. Clearly when you're in a mixed environment, maybe not so much nowadays, but then when I was that age, the boys were much more dominant and perhaps more pushy in terms of what they wanted to do. But I don't really remember it being any difficulties. Yeah, so it was more attractive. There were enough, but it wasn't like I was the only girl. We had a lot of girls there, so we were all involved in all sorts of different activities, and certainly some of the more physical activities, when you're talking about some of the building work and putting up tents and chopping wood for campfires, I suppose, there would be some differences to what the girls would tend to do and the boys would tend to do, but I mean, everyone mucked in and did something, so I don't really remember it being a big deal. We were all in it together. Yeah, we all got mucky and dirty and enjoyed it.
Yeah. I remember this basically too. I mean, when I was at school, there was this, I remember some people calling girls who really got involved in getting themselves dirty, doing the normal things that kids do, and they referred to them as tomboys. And this for me was quite odd, because I'd always been in those kinds of groups where girls did exactly the same things as guys, and I always thought, well, wait a minute, that's nothing weird. That's completely normal. Does this kind of thing exist today, do you think? I mean,
I don't think that people are talking that way anymore. I think scout activities, when you're talking about camping and cleaning out ponds, I mean, I did caving and abseiling and walking, a lot of orienteering. I mean, it's all about being outside, and I think nowadays, I think girls can do all those activities just as well, if not better. I think the girls were always better at orienteering, I seem to remember, when it came to reading maps.
Yeah, wonderful. And also organizing rallies. I think there was a certain sense of creativity and being able to find new ways of kind of challenging people at different checkpoints and so on. This was something that we always liked to do when we went camping. You told us before that when you then joined the international movement when you were 18, 19. Is that correct?
Well, I was a Venture Scout from 16, but I think one of the biggest experiences for me, the most influential experience, I think, within my scouting time, was 3 months that I spent at Kandersteg International Scout Centre when I was about 19. And to explain what that is, it's a big, an old chalet that Baden Powell, in his time, he's the founder of the Scout movement, spotted in Switzerland that was becoming available. It was a chalet that had been used for tunnel workers. They had built a tunnel through the Alps from Switzerland heading towards Italy. And when that tunnel was finished, there was some buildings that became available. And he said this was a perfect place for an international scout centre. It's at the end of a valley with mountains going up three sides, very steep. He created this international scout centre with the idea of bringing scouts from all over the world together, camping together, or sometimes staying in the chalet together and learning about each other. So a sort of permanent mini jamboree is what his vision was. And that scout centre has now been around for 100 years. And when I was 19, I went there and worked there for 3 months as a volunteer on the staff. And at the time, we were 25 people from 17 different countries working together intensely for 3 months, running this centre, so offering activities, mixing groups up, organising campfires, taking them on hikes, running barbecues, all sorts of different activities. So the scouts would come in and out for, a week at a time or 2 weeks at a time, but lots and lots of different nationalities from all over the world. And that vision, I have to say, it's grown and grown and grown. So ever since I was there on staff, it's now a really huge centre. Now the staff, they have in the summer probably about 70 people on staff, all mainly volunteers still helping to run the centre. And they have something like up to 2,000 people on site.
Oh, wow.
In the summer. So in the course of the whole year, I think there are around 85,000 overnights of people staying there. And the emphasis is still on getting the nationalities to mix and to learn about each other, so international friendship, but also combined with adventurous activities. And it's the perfect place because you have the mountains, you have the rivers, you have abseiling, you have rock climbing, you have all sorts of activities that you can do there, plus getting to know people from different countries. And it's a very simple recipe, just bring people together, get them to experience things together. But most people go away absolutely sort of really infected with the spirit of the place. And that happened to me in my 3 months when I was there. And afterwards, I kept coming back, for reunions and to meet people again. And then eventually I ended up on the Kandersteg International Scout Centre Committee. So looking at the running of the operation, looking at the marketing of the operation, and following that, I'm still involved now, much more in an advisory capacity than in an official capacity, but I'm now on the marketing advisory group. So this is me many, many, many years later, but still involved with the Kandersteg International Scout Centre, and I go back there at least once a year, if not twice a year.
Oh, wow.
So it's one of my favourite places for the scenery, the atmosphere, for everything about it. And that, for me, opened also my world in terms of suddenly I had all these different nationalities and people that I had worked with very closely, had very intense friendships. And after that, I actually went for a year out after university. I travelled around the world for a whole year, and I basically visited all the people that I had met through this International Scout Centre. So it was like a trip around the world, but staying overnight with people that I had met and reigniting those friendships. And some of those people I'm still in touch with now. So that's how it lasts over many, many years.
Yeah, fantastic. And I mean, you answered one of the immediate questions that came to mind, which is it still sort of functioning in the same way? But I imagine to be able to go there, you need to be attached to a scouting chapter. You need to be an active member of a scouting troop. Is that correct?
Non-scouts can also stay there. So you can imagine it as a bit like a youth hostel. There are rooms there that you can stay in. It's a campsite. You can arrive and pitch up your tent. But clearly it's very scout orientated. So when you arrive at the place, you'll feel the scouting sort of the scouting signs, the flags, the emblems, the activities that are offered. So probably 85% of the people that do stay there are scout groups. So people that know about the centre, who've heard about the centre through scouting, and scout leaders that organise the trip to go there. So yes, the main audience is scouting, but it's not exclusive to scouting. In fact, in the off season, they're always really interested in getting people to stay there outside of scouting, just to fill the beds and to get people to use the place. So it's sometimes used for seminars, for training, for other youth organisations, or for local schools and youth clubs in Switzerland.
Wow. Okay. All right. And I'd love to put, if there is a website, I'm sure there is, in the podcast notes, so that for those people who are interested, then they can have a look at it and maybe be inspired themselves. Is there also a website where people because this podcast, people listen to it from different countries. Is there like an international website where people can click on their local area to see if there are organizations there for them as well?
Yeah, there is at the world level, there's the World Organization of the Scout Movement website. I can give you the link afterwards. And yeah, every local scout group, if you just put in the word scout in whatever language you want, you will find the local websites. So it's pretty easy, I think, on the website to find out where your local group might be. Yeah.
And also, as we were sort of talking off mic, you mentioned that you found your partner through scouting, and both of your daughters are involved as well.
That's right. That shows you what an effect scouting can have on your life. That, as I said, you have experienced very intense relationships through scouting. So inevitably, people do actually meet each other and forge longer-term relationships. And the place I just talked to you about, Kandersteg, was actually, I first met my husband in Kandersteg, and it was at a World Scouts youth event that we both attended. We didn't actually get together as a couple at that time, but that's where we initially met. And then 2 years later, he was somebody I happened to visit when I came to Berlin. He was actually was studying in Berlin at the time, and so we reconnected again 2 years later, and that's when the magic happened, shall we say? And we've been together ever since. So yeah, he was very involved in German scouting with an organisation called BDP, Bund Pfadfinderinnen, and he was also involved at national level within German scouting, and has been also involved in international level. So we've sort of met through the scouting scene, shall we say, connected that way. And as you just said, we have two daughters now, a grown-up daughter that's 22, and a daughter now that's 16, and both have been very active in scouting. Obviously, as parents, scouting parents, we wanted them to try it out. We were very keen not to put too much pressure on, to say, but at least try it and see what you think. But I have to say now they are both very active, involved. The older one has actually been a scout leader in her local scout group in Berlin. Not anymore, because she's just left to start studying somewhere else, but she's been very much involved, in all her closest friends, I think I would say, have come through scouting. And the youngest one is about to become what we would call a patrol leader. So she's currently abroad on her year abroad, but when she comes back, she will come back into the scout group and become a patrol leader. So she's about to take on responsibility, and she's only 16. So
fantastic. So
I'm looking forward to that. And yes, they've both had the chance to visit this Kandersteg International Scout Centre. They've, in fact, my eldest daughter has also worked there for a little while as a volunteer. And yeah, they've all both been involved with jamborees as well. So yes, you do. I think the enthusiasm, as you can hear from me, we have managed to hand it on and to infect our daughters in the same way. And that's very satisfying for me to see that they are enjoying scouting as much as I did at that age as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, it's quite clear that you are involved in the marketing, because the proof is in the pudding, isn't it? I mean, you live it yourselves. You are so excited talking about it, and your children themselves have also are thoroughly engaged. I mean, that's such a clear message of why people should actually get involved, try it out, and see where it takes them.
I think just talking about myself, and I think the impact of scouting, I think is the word. I mean, that's one of the ideas that I've been pushing quite hard within the marketing, both of the Kandersteg International Scout Centre, but also of scouting generally within the World Scout Foundation. So we've spend quite a lot of time talking about or wanting to broadcast the impact of scouting on young people's lives and what a difference it can make to the individual, but then also to the community in which you live through the service projects, through the active citizenship that scouting is promoting. So I have been involved in a project where we've been getting young people particularly to talk about the impact on their lives of scouting, and then what impact they then bring to their local communities as a result of that. So a particular project that I was recently involved in is just putting together little videos of young people talking about their experiences in order to obviously to hopefully influence other young people to do the same, but also to influence potential fundraisers in the future to say this is the reason why we should be supporting scouting if we want to change society going forward, if we want to have more active citizens and people taking on responsibility and changing the world around them. Making the world a better place, as Baden-Powell would have said.
Yeah, and there are also, what's indeed interesting is how there are so many sort of more modern projects or missions which kind of repeat similar kinds of principles as the scouting organizations have done. So we've got the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which talks about reducing inequalities, developing partnerships, and these kinds of principles which are inherent already within the scouting movement. And it's always great to see that they are doing in some way what the scouting movement has always done. It's great also to see the energy that young people provide and being active, and indeed, hopefully, there will be fruit born of that activity on local levels. If you were going to give, now this is always a tough question to answer, but if you were going to give one overriding reason why a person today, a teen who has never been involved in Scouts, should consider that rather than spending a Saturday afternoon on their Xbox or what have you in front of the telly, what would you say?
Your question is, what is the key USP or the key fact?
Yeah. How would you get them out? Yeah. How would you get them off the sofa and out and experiencing a scout troop or something like this?
I think I would use the word fun. I think most people are inspired by having a good time. Yeah, so fun is something that is an essential part of scouting. But you're having fun whilst you're learning and whilst you're developing yourself and your own skills. And in doing so, you actually have doing something with a purpose. So giving service to your local community and working out how to work in a team. But if you start listing all the soft skills, it starts to feel a bit like, oh, I'm going on to some sort of seminar to learn about, how to be a good person. But actually, I think it's the fun. It's the fun that really is attractive and what keeps people connected. The social aspects that you have friends for life. So I would put the emphasis on that in terms of the sell, in terms of making it attractive. But you're learning so much whilst you're having fun that you don't even notice that you're learning.
Tania, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your experiences and also for talking about the wonderful work that you do. And I wish you and the scouting movement all the best. And I look forward to speaking with you again.
I look forward to that. And maybe the next time we can talk a bit more about Save the Children.
Absolutely. That's a deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Lovely to speak with you.
And a mic.